The courtroom in downtown Tampa was filled to capacity. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but that didn't stop reporters from crowding the gallery. Law students whispered nervously. A few congressional aides stood along the back wall, pretending to be interns. Something big was about to happen, but no one knew what. Pam Bondi sat at the defense table, her posture straight, her eyes steady. She wore a crimson suit, sharp enough to cut through the tension in the air. Her hands rested calmly on a stack of documents, but one folder was different. It was marked with a red seal and a single label, Exhibit 4-7B. The judge, Gregory Presnell, tapped his gavel. "Ms. Bondi, you may proceed." She stood slowly and walked toward the podium. Her heels clicked softly across the marble floor. Then she looked directly at the judge and spoke not with fire, but with ice. "Your Honor," she said, her southern accent calm but deliberate. "This court's recent order doesn't just misread the law. It undermines the very foundation of judicial independence our Constitution was built on." Presnell raised an eyebrow, clearly annoyed. But Bondi didn't stop. "You are sanctioning elected state officials," she said, "for investigating election fraud while this court shields itself behind procedural tricks." Gasps echoed across the gallery. A reporter from the Hill started typing furiously. A law clerk dropped her pen. Bondi turned slightly and reached down into her case file. She pulled out a thick, leather-bound book and placed it on the table with a loud slap. "The Federalist Papers," she said. "It's annotated by the late Justice Scalia himself. I suggest this court revisit them, 'cause what I'm about to present will make your order look like a footnote in a much darker story." The room went silent. Then Bondi held up Exhibit 4-7BA Blackbinder, heavier than it looked. The courtroom deputy stepped forward. She handed it over. The judge opened it. At first, he said nothing. His expression didn't change. But something in his jaw tightened. "What is this?" he asked. "It's a ledger," Bondi replied. "Not just any ledger. These are records of private communications between sitting federal judges and White House advisors, unauthorized, unlogged, and unconstitutional." The judge slammed the ledger shut. "Where did you get this?" Bondi didn't blink. "A sealed source under federal protection. And it's been verified by 2 independent forensic analysts. Every message, every signature." The judge's face paled. Whispers rippled through the room. One of the aides in the back quietly stepped out, phone already in hand. Bondi stepped back from the podium. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "I didn't come here to accuse. I came here to expose. Because while this court was lecturing us about boundaries, someone at the highest level of this nation's judiciary was already breaking them." There was movement in the gallery. A journalist stood up mid-session and walked out, dialing her editor. And then came the final blow. Bondi looked straight at Judge Presnell and said, "The ledger includes entries from 4 federal judges and 1 Chief Justice, John G. Roberts." The room froze. You could hear a pin drop war, the sound of every phone buzzing in pockets as news broke in real time. "Chief Justice implicated" flashed across Twitter. Hashtags exploded before the judge could even respond. Bondi gathered her papers, calm as ever. "This case isn't just about jurisdiction," she said. "It's about integrity. And the people of this country deserve to know who's sitting behind the bench and what they're hiding." She turned and walked back to her seat. Behind the bench, Judge Presnell didn't move. His face was pale, his hands clenched. Outside, in the Florida heat, a dozen cameras were already waiting. And in Washington, in the chambers of the Supreme Court, a light turned on in John Roberts' private office even, though it was barely dawn. "Let me know when you'd like Part 2, Whisper Network, to begin." The news hit Washington like a thunderclap. Within minutes of Bondi's courtroom revelation, the Ledger Exhibit 4-7B became the most searched term in America. By noon, hashtags like #LedgerLeak and #RobertsExposed were trending worldwide. But inside the quiet marble halls of the Supreme Court, no one was speaking publicly. Not yet. Chief Justice John Roberts sat alone in his chambers. He hadn't moved from his desk in over an hour. A printed photo of the ledger page was in front of him, his name tweeztyped next to timestamp messages to a senior White House official. The knock on the door was soft but urgent. "Chief," said the voice on the other side. "They're setting up cameras outside the court." Roberts didn't answer right away. He finally stood, walked to the window, and looked out across First Street. Protesters were already gathering. Signs were going up. No one above the bench. Recuse or resign. He turned back. "Get me the marshal. Kate, at the Department of Justice." Quietly. While Roberts moved in silence, across town, Pam Bondi was speaking again, this time from the Capitol steps. The media surrounded her. "I didn't come to make accusations," she told reporters. "I came to deliver evidence. What the American people do with it, what Congress does with it, that's not up to me. But I'll tell you this. If our highest court is compromised, then we've lost more than a case. We've lost the Republic." The questions flew in all directions. Is the ledger authentic? Will you testify under oath? Are you calling for Chief Justice Roberts to resign? But Bondi gave no yes or no. It's only one chilling sentence. What's in that ledger is just the beginning. Inside the Department of Justice, Attorney General Alina Marquez watched the feed in silence. She didn't blink as Bondi spoke. Then, without looking at her aides, she said, "Start reviewing old dockets. Flag every decision in the last 5 years where a federal ruling aligned too perfectly with executive interests, especially immigration, surveillance, and corporate immunity." A pause. "K. And check who the presiding judges were. Cross-reference with that ledger." Back at the Supreme Court, Roberts wasn't wasting time. His private phone rang. A secure line. Only a few had the number. He picked it up. "What do they know?" a man's voice asked. Roberts closed the blinds. "She has the ledger. Not the rest." "You sure?" "Yes, if she had the Vienna tape, we'd be having this conversation under indictment." There was silence on the line. Then stall. The voice said, "Say nothing. Let the media cycle turn." But Roberts wasn't so sure. He was already seeing the edges of something unraveling. Meanwhile, an international ripple began forming. In Geneva, Swiss journalist Annika Voss posted a short tweet. "The Bondi ledger confirms what we suspected. But America isn't ready for what connects Vienna, Bucharest, and Washington. #their EdThread." The tweet didn't go viral immediately, but the right people saw it. At a CIA listening post in Berlin, an analyst flagged the message. Within an hour, the name Annika Voss appeared in a secure email thread titled Operation Hemlock Contingency Path Opened. And back in Tampa, Bondi was in a small room at a secure location, watching it all unfold. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an old ally inside the intelligence community. "If you're going to drop the rest, do it fast. Once Vienna comes out, they'll come for you next." Bondi didn't reply. She looked across the table at her legal aide. "Do we have confirmation on the source?" The aide nodded. "Vienna tapes are real. And they implicate more than judges." Bondi exhaled. "Not fear, focus. Then get ready," she said. "Because what comes next isn't about the law. It's about survival." The video was only 7 minutes long. Grainy, time-stamped in the bottom right corner with muffled sound and a slight hum in the background. But the faces were clear. 2 American officials, 1 British envoy, and a man whose presence in the room should have raised every alarm in Washington. Judge Gregory Presnall, the same Judge Bondi had challenged in court just days ago. The footage was secretly recorded in Vienna, inside a luxury hotel conference room during a closed-door humanitarian law summit. But there was no humanitarian discussion happening in that room. Instead, They were talking about Operation Meridian off the books, diplomatic strategy designed to influence judicial rulings in veto-aligned countries by using private communications, with federal judges under the guise of security briefings. And at the end of the table, looking uncomfortable but present, was Presnale. The Vienna tapes had surfaced. Bondi sat in the secure office, her eyes locked on the screen. Her aide, Jonah, had just finished decoding the metadata and confirmed. The footage hadn't been tampered with. Where did it come from? She asked quietly. Jonah hesitated. An old contact in Interpol said it was passed anonymously to them, then leaked to a dead-drop server used by journalists in The Hague. Bondi leaned back. And how many copies exist? 4. We have 1, Geneva has 1, and 2 unknowns. She nodded slowly. Then we assume everyone dangerous already has it. Across the Atlantic, the video had already reached Capitol Hill in a private Senate Intelligence Committee room. Senator Rachel Dawes, chair of the Subcommittee on Judicial Ethics, slammed her hand on the table. This isn't just about one judge, she said. This is about the Chief Justice of the United States being linked to a quiet campaign of influence coordinated between our courts and foreign governments. The committee room fell into silence. Who knew about this? Another senator? Asked. Not us, Dawes replied bitterly, and not the voters. At that moment, a staffer rushed in, holding a tablet. Madam Chair, he said, pale, the Vienna tapes just leaked to The Guardian. Its front page. Global. A beat. Passed. Call a hearing, Dawes said. Tomorrow. Back at the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Roberts watched the clip in silence. His face was unreadable, but his hand gripped the edge of the table tighter with every frame. When it ended, he turned to his clerk. Write a statement, he said. No confirmation, no denial. Say the Chief Justice does not comment on unverified international leaks. The clerk hesitated. And what if the Senate calls you to testify? Roberts looked at him. Then I'll testify. But it wasn't just the Senate watching. In Langley, Virginia, at CIA headquarters, the Vienna tapes triggered a separate response. Director Amanda Kyle met with 2 top-level advisors in a soundproof room. Presnale was never supposed to be there, one of them said. That was handled by DOJ, not us. Kyle frowned. Handled or buried? No one answered. She turned to her deputy. Tell the field teams to go dark on anyone connected to Operation Meridian. No communications, no exposure. If this thing spreads, we're not looking at scandal. We're looking at an international incident. Meanwhile, in Geneva, the journalist Annika Voss, who first hinted at the Vienna tapes, posted a new message. Bondi cracked the door. The tapes blew it open. But the thread doesn't end at the court. It ends in Warsaw. That cryptic post was retweeted over 2 million times in 4 hours. Pam Bondi saw the message and knew what it meant. She called Jonah. Get me our guy in Poland. Quietly. Tell him we need to verify Warsaw. Jonah's face changed. If Warsaw is real, Pam, then we're dealing with more than judges. She nodded. We're dealing with a covert structure. And I'm guessing Roberts wasn't the architect, just one of the bricks. Outside, thunder rolled across the Tampa sky. But inside that room, the storm was just beginning. Rain tapped gently against the windows of a small apartment tucked behind the U.S. consulate. Inside, a former intelligence contractor named Nikolai Radecki watched the news with a blank expression. He had worked black operations for over 12 years, until he vanished from the grid after leaking confidential files about judicial manipulation in Eastern Europe. Now those same files were being aired across international news. Nikolai knew. The leak hadn't come from him, which meant someone else had found the Warsaw thread. His encrypted phone buzzed twice. Then silence. The code told him everything. A secure contact from the U.S. was trying to reach him. He opened a secure line. A voice came through, familiar but older. Nikolai, it's Bondi. He paused, measuring his breath. I figured. You're in deeper than you think, Pam. I know, but I need you to confirm it. Is it real? The Warsaw operation, was it tied to Roberts? Nikolai looked out the window. Roberts didn't initiate it, but his court was used. The judicial channel became the clean hand in a dirty operation. Pam was quiet on the line. He continued. After 2018, a back-channel agreement was formed. Select justices were given classified briefings that masked covert coordination with allied nations' legal systems. Warsaw was a pilot site. They tested a method to reroute intelligence-approved rulings through judges who didn't even know. They were part of something illegal. Pam's voice dropped to a whisper. And how does Roberts fit in? He signed off on the judicial liaisons. Might have thought he was protecting national security. But someone above him used that access to pass influence. Not Justice. Pam's hand shook slightly as she jotted notes. Do you have evidence? Nikolai opened a steel case under his bed. Beside, a series of drives and one slim red folder. Marked W channel. I have everything. But if I hand it over, they'll come after me again. I barely survived last time. You won't be alone this time, Pam said. We have senators now. Journalists. The world is watching. But Nikolai only smiled darkly. The world watches for 24 hours. Then it forgets. That's how systems like this survive. Across the ocean, the Senate was preparing for its emergency hearing. Chief Justice Roberts was scheduled to appear under oath in 2 days. The White House had issued a statement of non-interference, but leaks suggested internal panic. Advisors were frantically scrubbing documents from multiple agencies. And behind closed doors, powerful people were meeting to stop what they feared most, the collapse of institutional trust. Meanwhile, at a private estate in Virginia, a man named Gareth Wells watched Bondi's courtroom speech on a loop. The sun had barely risen over Washington, but the city was already wide awake. At the Capitol, a sea of reporters crowded outside the Senate hearing room. Live coverage had begun on every major network. The country was holding its breath today. Chief Justice John Roberts was expected to answer questions under oath. But as the cameras focused on the polished wood doors, something else was unfolding in secret. Inside a secured CIFA classified intelligence room 2 floors below the Department of Justice had summoned Pam Bondi. She walked in calmly, flanked by 2 aides. Waiting for her were 3 men from the DOJ's Internal National Security Unit and a 4th man from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. They didn't offer greetings. Ms. Bondi, one of them began before today's hearing. We need to speak about the material you've been receiving from international sources, namely Nikolai Radecki. Pam didn't blink. He's a protected witness under international asylum. His files back up my case. One of the men slid a thick folder across the table. Do you know who else received his files? Ms. Bondi? She opened the folder, photos, screenshots, email chains. Annika Voss in Geneva. Journalist from Germany. South Korea Evan, a diplomat from Australia. You're tracking the files, Pam said. You're monitoring everyone he sent them to. The man leaned in. We're trying to contain a narrative. You may think you're exposing corruption, but you're also walking us toward an international intelligence breach. Foreign governments now have access to internal U.S. judicial communications. Do you understand the risk? Pam's voice turned cold. Do you understand the risk of keeping this hidden? The room fell quiet. Then the man from the ODNI spoke. Ms. Bondi, we're asking strongly that you hold off testifying this morning. Let us clean this up through diplomatic channels. Quietly. Pam stood slowly. I've spent my entire life defending the law, she said. And I watch people twist it into a weapon. You can threaten me, but I'm not afraid of shadows anymore. She turned and walked out without waiting for permission. Upstairs, the hearing was about to begin. Chief Justice John Roberts sat at the witness table, his face calm but visibly strained. Cameras clicked. Flashbulbs sparked. Senator Roland Jex sat just feet away, looking every bit the concerned patriot. But Pam now knew the truth. He was part of it too. Behind his mask of accountability, Jex had dined with Presnell. He had helped slow past investigations. He had kept the machine running. The machine needed a face to blame. And they had chosen Roberts. The chair called the session to order. Pam entered the room just in time. Reporters turned, flashes lit up again. And in her hand was a slim red folder. She approached the panel. "I have supplemental evidence," she said, her voice steady. To be entered into the record, Jex glanced at her. "Ms. Bondi, that's highly irregular." She cut him off. "So is foreign influence through our judiciary. So is using judges as pawns in covert diplomacy." She placed the folder down. "I have communications between sitting judges and foreign advisors. I have photos of Senate leaders at private dinners with diplomats. This isn't just about Roberts. This is about the entire structure." Gasps rippled across the room. Roberts looked up, surprised. Pam locked eyes with him. "I don't know what you knew, Chief Justice. But I do know you were being used. And maybe it's time the country knows that too." Outside the building, news broke in real time. Hashtag the Red Folder began trending across every social platform. News anchors scrambled to get updates. Some called it a conspiracy. Others, a reckoning. And deep inside a room in Langley, CIA analysts watched the live stream closely. One of them turned to a director. "Sir, should we initiate blackout protocol?" The director didn't answer. He just stared at Pam's folder on screen. "'Cause?" He recognized the symbols stamped on the bottom. It wasn't a government seal. It was the private mark of an old operation one long thought buried. And that meant something terrifying. This wasn't just about corrupt judges or a compromised Senate. This was about a ghost network, one that had never stopped operating, one now being exposed by the wrong person. Let me know when you're ready for Part 6, where the fallout begins to tear apart the very heart of the system. The footage of the Red Folder had gone global. Within hours, media from London, Berlin, and Tokyo were running special reports. Headlines read, "Bondi Bombshell Rocks U.S. Judiciary." In America, news desks turned their graphics blood red. Anchors sat stunned, reading aloud the list of names tied to the folder's contents. But while the public was only just catching up, the intelligence community was already in motion. In a basement level of the Pentagon, a secured task force was activated. It had no official name, only a code name, Phoenix Echo. It had not been used in nearly 2 decades, until now. An Air Force colonel stared at a decrypted page from Pam Bondi's folder. His voice shook. She just cracked a black budget ops ring that predates 9/11s across the city. Pam was being driven in a black SUV, escorted by 2 U.S. Marshals. They weren't talking. She could tell they didn't know whether they were protecting her or watching her. She stared out the tinted window, watching Washington race to put out a fire it could no longer contain. At the Justice Department, 2 men argued behind closed doors. "She can't testify again," one snapped. "Not with that material. She's exposed to many assets." Another man, calmer, opened a file labeled Project Nightroom. "Roberts isn't the only one at risk. If that folder gets fully released, we're not just talking about resignations. We're talking NATO friction. We're talking collapse of judicial credibility." But at that very moment, something more urgent was happening. In Geneva, the journalist Annika Voss had just posted a video. It was only 45 seconds long. But it showed a young woman clearly distressed in what looked like an embassy security room. Her voice, shaky, said, "I was told I'd be safe. They lied. I was told Bondi would never get that folder." The caption read, "Exfiltrated witness. State-sponsored denial no longer possible." The internet erupted. Hashtags flooded every corner of the web. Hashtag Red Folder Truth, hashtag Bondi Leaks, hashtag Nightroom Network. Pam's SUV pulled into a secured federal building. She stepped out and was immediately surrounded by press. Flashes blinded her. Reporters screamed questions. Ms. Bondi, are you accusing the Chief Justice of espionage? Is it true you have foreign surveillance data on sitting senators? Are you under threat? Pam walked past without a word. Inside, she was ushered to a soundproof room where a Senate Intelligence Committee member waited. He was pale, sweating slightly. He held a single photo from her folder. It showed a Judge Not Roberts at a private dinner table with a foreign intelligence officer and a U.S. defense contractor. The senator looked up at Pam. We always knew something was happening beneath the surface, he said. But this opens up operations we thought were buried after the Cold War. Pam sat down slowly. They weren't buried, she said. They were privatized. The senator leaned back in his chair. Do you understand what happens now? Nodded. They'll come for me legally first, then maybe not. He hesitated, then said quietly, You're not alone in this. There are others, quietly helping. Just then, his aide rushed in, breathless. Sir, we have a problem. The live stream feed from Langley just went dark. The room froze. What do you mean dark? The senator asked. The aide held up a tablet. The internal systems were breached. Someone wiped every frame of the folder footage from our network backups. And he turned the screen around. On it was a black image with red text. You were warned. Underneath it, Phoenix Echo has returned. Pam stood. This is bigger than I thought. The senator nodded grimly. And it's only just beginning. Night fell over Washington. Street corners buzzed with protests. Major cities prepared for civil unrest. And in the shadows, an old covert network began to reawaken, one that had stayed quiet for 20 years. Until one folder cracked it open. And one woman refused to be silent. The clock struck midnight in Washington. Sleep was not an option. The Supreme Court building, normally silent under the moonlight, had become a fortress. Barricades were in place. Dozens of journalists camped outside. Flashlights glared. Cameras clicked nonstop. Rumors swirled that Chief Justice Roberts was preparing a statement. But inside a quiet office far from the chaos, Pam Bondi sat with 2 flash drives. One red, one black. On the red drive was the full uncut ledger, the documents, text messages, and voice notes proving years of judicial influence from political offices, foreign consultants, and even defense agencies. Some judges had clearly ruled in favor of policies they were also privately profiting from. On the black drive was something worse. It was labeled Project Nightroom Tier 7. Only 4 people in the world were supposed to have access to Tier 7 material. Now Pam was the 5th. And she had to choose admit it to a closed congressional hearing, or release it publicly and face the wrath of a system built to silence truth. Elsewhere, Robert stood behind his desk in his chambers. A folded paper lay on his desk, a resignation letter, but he hadn't signed it. He looked at his television. Protesters were gathered outside the Supreme Court gates, chanting both defend the court and judicial lies kill justice. He opened a drawer and pulled out an old phone, not a government-issued one, but a burner. He dialed a number and waited. Has Bondi seen Tier 7? A deep voice answered. Yes. Roberts replied. There was silence. Then the voice said, Then she's already marked. Roberts said nothing. He ended the call and stared at the resignation letter again, at the Pentagon. The task force known as Phoenix Echo was already operating at full alert. One general paced the Situation Room. We underestimated Bondi, he muttered. I know. The court is compromised. A junior analyst, hands shaking, slid a report across the table. Sir, we found something. The black drive includes footage. The general frowned. Footage of what? The analyst whispered, a trial. Record secret judges. Military uniforms. They weren't Americans. The general paled back in her safe room. Pam stared at the red and black drives. The decision tore at her. One was massive corruption. The other was something darker beyond politics. It's almost untouchable. Secure phone on the table rang. It was the Geneva journalist, Annika Voss. "You're trending again," she said softly. "Not the time." Pam replied, "No, listen," Annika continued. "You remember the woman from the video, the one in the embassy?" "Yes, she's dead." Pam's breath stopped. She was found in a hotel room in Prague. The note left behind. K. It quoted one of Robert's rulings on national security. Secrecy. Silence followed. Then Pam stood up and inserted the red drive into a secure terminal. Within moments, thousands of pages of evidence uploaded to a digital vault built by investigative media and protected by global human rights attorneys. The public version would redact personal details, but the truth would be undeniable. Then she turned to the black drive. For a long moment, her hand hovered. She picked it up, then placed it in a locked case. "This one, not yet," she whispered. At 8 a.m., Pam Bondi walked up the Capitol steps, surrounded by federal security. Reporters swarmed, shouting her name. She didn't flinch. Inside the chamber, a joint investigative committee had been formed. Cameras were rolling. The world was watching. Chief Justice Roberts did not appear. Instead, letter was read aloud, his resignation. Gasps echoed across the room. The senator chairing the panel turned to Pam, double quotes, "Ms. Bondi, you have the floor." She stepped up to the microphone, the room utterly still. "In the past 72 hours," she began, "we've learned that power unchecked and unexamined rots the very pillars of justice. The ledger I released is not about one man. It's about a system that forgot its soul." Cameras zoomed in on her face. "I don't come here to destroy the judiciary. I come here to save it." Applause began, not from everyone, but from enough. Pam continued, "There is still more to uncover. But for now, the truth has cracked the marble. And no matter how much power tries to seal it again, people have seen what's inside." Outside, as the sun rose, the chants grew louder, not of anger, but hope. Truth had survived. But in a basement far from Capitol Hill, a quiet man sat at a console and looked at a different screen. It read Tier 7, eyes only, awaiting activation. And beneath it, a new name, Bondi. The game wasn't over. It had just changed.